Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart, and today I'll be going through my favorite spend-up plays, mid-range plays, and value plays on tomorrow's NFL slates. We got 11 games, $1 million to first place, so let's win that money. So if you're new to the channel, or if you're a returning viewer, hit that like button. Do really appreciate it. Subscribe, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by Thanksgiving, and then turn on that notification bell. And now let's get into the breakdown. As always, follow me on Twitter, HartDFS. This is a look back at my shutdown lineup. Talked about how I really like Kyler as a flex option. Really liked Hopkins, who was my favorite captain play. Kamara, Olave, Will Lutz, Ingram, all solid, but once again, just an absolutely frustrating primetime game. Like, this is the worst winning lineup I've ever seen. Truly. No hate. Like, obviously, winning 500,000 is fantastic, but Andy Dalton's going to be your optimal captain, and then the Cardinals defense is going to be alongside him in the flex. How does it even work? Like, it's just, these games are so frustrating. Juwan Johnson going for 2 touchdowns on 5 catches, only 32 yards. It's just, these games are just insane. They're almost unplayable, as I tweeted. But yeah, that was a look back at my lineup. Cashed somehow, but yeah. These pride time games are absolutely frustrating, but let's get into the slate breakdown. At the top, 8K, Lamar Jackson. I mentioned him last video, how I really liked him. Once again, he had a disappointing game. I think he was at 20 fantasy points, and then he goes out and fumbles and then throws an interception in back-to-back series. But going against Cleveland here, they're giving up a ton of points, ton of yards, so I do like a bounce-back spot here for Lamar. It's going to happen one of these games. As we saw at the beginning of the season, he can absolutely go off. So I really like him, 8K. Patrick Mahomes going against San Fran. I don't love that matchup. Patrick Mahomes has been great this year, but San Francisco's defense has been pretty solid. I know they've lost a few people in that secondary, so I'm assuming that'll scare some ownership off of him, so you can definitely look to him at lower ownership. But there's a lot of good options here on QBs today. 7,200 for Justin Herbert going against a terrible Seattle defense. Really like that. Joe Burrow going against Atlanta. He's been looking better last game against New Orleans. Like him. Dak's whooped back. They had the highest scoring offense. People forget that Dallas had the highest scoring offense in the league last year. He had a terrible first game against a solid, Bucks defense. And then everyone kind of fell off the train. Really like him at 6,700. Do expect him to be full go. High scoring offense, nothing's really changed. They've run the ball more with Cooper Rush, but I do expect them to get back to throwing the ball a ton. So love him at 6,700. Tom Brady against Carolina looks decent. Carolina's pass defense has been one of the worst in the league, but Tom Brady has just been bad. That team has been bad. So if you want to take more of a low ownership, chance there at 6,300, I don't mind it. Russell Wilson's out. We got that news. So Rypien is in. It's just disgusting. Aaron Rodgers, I'd say he's weirdly one of my favorite plays in the quarterback spot here at 6,000. He's throwing the ball a good amount. Obviously, they don't have like a main go-to receiver. Hasn't hit 300 passing yards yet, but I mean, they're going against one of the worst teams in the league, the Commanders, Taylor Heineke. So I don't mind taking a sneaky shot here at Aaron Rodgers on Washington. Derek Carr versus Houston. I mean, they're just running the ball a ton now, so I just want to go there. In this 5K range, obviously you can always take a shot on Geno. He does have some upside. Hasn't looked great last game or the game before that against New Orleans, but has that upside there. Mariota, I don't mind him as well. He's not going to throw the ball a ton, but he's a guy who's going to run the ball a ton and get you a rushing touchdown. So 5,500, he could easily pay off that price tag, especially when they're going to need to keep up with that high-powered Cincinnati offense. That really does it for me. I mean, Matt Ryan, he's just throwing the ball a ton, but it looks like Jonathan Taylor is back, so maybe they'll bring him back down into the 30s, 30 attempts a game range. Yeah, that really does for me. There's just a ton of options I really like. I'd say my favorite right now is probably going to be Dak, and then I'd say Lamar and Herbert are tied for me. But there's just a lot of options. I don't really have a lean, but I'd say Dak going against that Detroit defense is one of my favorite, areas to target. Same thing with Herbert going against Seattle, and then Lamar Jackson going against Cleveland. All teams that give up a ton of points. So really like those. McCaffrey, it looks like he'll play. I just don't think he'd go there yet, just because obviously he just got traded. So I think it's a little bit too rushed. He'll probably see maybe 10 touches. I'm sure they'll get him involved in the passing game a little bit, but still has to learn that offense. Don't think you go there. Eckler versus Seattle's defense. I mean, Eckler has been absolutely popping off the past 3 weeks. Obviously, not going to run the ball a ton. He can still get you there in a limited amount of attempts, but he's going off in the passing game. Maybe, his floor comes down a little bit if Keenan Allen actually does play, but still expect him to see, maybe 6 to 7 targets a game out of the backfield. So 8,200 or 8,300 for Eckler looks pretty solid. I do love me some Derrick Henry, 8,200 against Tennessee. I think both backs, him and Jonathan Taylor, are going to put on a show. I mean, Derrick Henry's been going off the past 3 weeks. I mean, he's a little touchdown reliant, but once again, if they get into the red zone, they're going to stuff it in with Derrick Henry. So 8,200 looks solid there. He's also been getting involved with the targets out of the backfield too, which is something we didn't see last year. So do like that a good amount. The Tennessee Titans defense has been decent, but I kind of expect a little bit of bounce back here for Jonathan Taylor. Coming off an injury, hasn't had a good season. The Colts offense has been terrible. So I do expect his ownership to be a little bit low. Don't mind getting to him at 8,100. It's just more of like a contrarian, ownership play. Nick Chubb against Baltimore. Don't mind it, 8K, but he is just, kind of touchdown dependent like Derrick Henry. But once again, they've both been going off, so looks like a solid price tag. It's just he doesn't have that ceiling when it comes to the targets out of the backfield like a guy like Eckler. So that's why paying 80 or 300 more bucks for a guy like Eckler, or paying down 300 bucks for a guy like Lenny, a guy who's seeing 20 plus attempts a game, and he's seen a ton of targets out of the backfield. Tom Brady loves to check it down, so I'd say I'd prefer Lenny over a Nick Chubb. But yeah, I mean they all look really, really good at the top here. Saquon against the Jaguars. I mean, it's one of those things, like, everyone looks very appealing on this slate. It's just, you really want to target Seattle and Detroit because they're just two terrible defenses. But once again, there's a ton of teams that are giving up a ton of points. So I don't really mind going to any one of these top backs. Obviously, they're all priced up high for a reason, but they're all great plays. Mixon, once again, I'll mention him. A guy who's going to see a ton of touches, ton of targets out of the backfield. So it's just one of these games he's going to go off. Really like him against Atlanta, even though they did a great job against the 49ers last week. Do expect Mixon to have a breakout game one of these games. Swift is back against Dallas. Don't mind him as a run back option here. 6,800. He is splitting time with Jamal Williams, but he's a great pass catcher. I expect him to be a full go here. So really like me some Swift at 6,800. Josh Jacobs, I'm assuming he'll be like 30% owned in the Millie Maker. Past 2 weeks, 28 attempts, 144 yards, 6 targets out of the backfield, 2 touchdowns, 31 receiving yards. Next game against the Chiefs, 21 for 154, a touchdown, 5 catches, 39 yards. Back-to-back 30 fantasy point games. He's only 6,500 going against a very, very bad Houston defense. I mean, either this chalk is going to smash or it's going to bust. So that's kind of what it's looking like on the slate. Everyone's going to be going to him. It's either you trust it or you don't. If you trust it and he goes off, great. If you trust it and he fails, then you're absolutely screwed there at 6,500 alongside probably the 30% of the field. So it's just one of those if you want to follow the chalk or go against it. Don't mind Dameon Pierce. He's seen a ton of attempts, seen some targets out of the backfield. True running back one. Going against a bad Raiders team. Looks like a decent play there at 6,400. Breece Hall going against Denver's defense. I just don't trust it. He's been fantastic. But the target, have come down a little bit out of the backfield. And the Denver defense is good, especially against the run. So I wouldn't go there. He's probably going to need some ownership because of how well he's been doing, but I just don't think he'd to force it. Jamal Williams against Dallas, not with, I'd prefer, he can't catch a few targets out of the backfield, but I prefer Swift. He's just a better receiver out of the backfield, and that Dallas defense is really good, so Swift's going to get involved in that passing game. CH has pretty much lost the backfield. Don't think he'd to go there. no more lucky touchdowns, and he's getting you no points. So don't think you have to force that. Zeke against this Detroit defense is interesting because Detroit's defense is someone we want to target, and Zeke's just not a popular player, but he's seen a ton of attempts. But with Dak back, maybe they throw it more. But I don't mind it. I really don't mind going to Zeke there at 6,000. Looks pretty solid. Melvin Gordon. Yeah, that's all I can say. Kenneth Walker going against that Chargers run defense looks great. Expect him to be involved heavily in this game, so I like him a good amount. They just don't throw him the ball at the backfield. Not really sure why. I mean, he's a solid pass catcher, so 5,800 looks great there. Brian Robinson, they look to get him involved heavily in that game against the Bears. Expect the same thing against Green Bay. But Green Bay's defense is pretty good, so I don't think you have to force that. That's really it. Not a lot of pay down options you can really pay or get away with. Or I guess Kenyon Drake is the last guy I mentioned, 5,100. J.K. Dobbins going to be out for the next 4 to 6 weeks, so Kenyon Drake, I just don't trust it. That teams everyone runs it. They're going to throw in multiple backs. Lamar runs it. He'll throw it to Mark Andrews. So it's 5,100 is a good price for him. I mean, that's kind of just like a ceiling game, that last game there against the Giants for Kenyon Drake. Only 10 rushes, 119 yards, a touchdown. They're not going to be heavily involved, with catching the balls out of the backfield as well. So you really need him to fall over the end zone because I don't expect much, but Cleveland is giving up a ton of points. So maybe you'll get lucky with a touchdown or two with 10 attempts for 60 yards from Drake. But yeah, I'll mention that. For the wide receivers, Devontae Adams looks solid. Darren Waller's out, as we saw against Kansas City. He only caught 3 of the passes, 3 of his 7 targets, but for 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's obviously a guy with massive upside, so the highest pay-up option for wide receivers. Don't mind going there. Jamar Chase, another guy, looks great going against Atlanta. Deebo Samuel, looks okay. Jimmy G is just tough trusting him. Pittman looks pretty solid here. Going to see a ton of targets. Jonathan Taylor's back, so maybe his targets dip down a little bit, but he's a solid option there at 7,400. Mike Williams, 7,200. Do expect to bounce back, but if Keenan Allen's back, I'd still maybe prefer Mike Williams. Everyone's probably going to flock to Keenan Allen because he's cheaper, but playing alongside Keenan Allen, he does have a good amount of upside there. St. Brown against Dallas, great run back option. Obviously, at the start of the season, was doing fantastic. Coming off those injuries, just making sure the ankle heals. Like him a good amount at 7,100. Mike Evans, 6,900. Looks great against Carolina. Expect a bounce back game there for him. CeeDee Lamb pairing alongside Dak, I think is a must. Really like that. Keenan Allen, as I said, is questionable. Looks like he should be able to give it a go, but it's a game time decision. If he's out, obviously look to a guy like Mike Williams, but if he's in, I'd still prefer Mike Williams. DK Metcalf looks like a solid bring back option if you're going to stack that game. Seattle versus the Chargers. T. Higgins looks good. 9 targets, 6 for 47. Slowly getting back from that ankle injury. 6,400, I think, is just a little too cheap for him. Chris Godwin, just too cheap. Seeing a massive amount of targets. Hasn't really gotten a touchdown yet, so once he gets that touchdown with those targets, it's going to be game over. So really like him at 6,300. Lazard looks like a solid option for if you're going to play Aaron Rodgers. As I said, they're going to look to get him more involved. 8 and 9 targets past 3 games. So really like him a good amount of 6,200. As I said, there's just a ton of people I like. It's just kind of what game you want to go with because there's a ton of options to kind of bring it back with. Who else will I mention here? Bateman, if he plays, I do have a good amount of interest there. 5,200 as the number 1 wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. But Gallup will mention because, Dak is back. Going to be the wide receiver 2 for them. Dubes, kind of disappointing past 2 games, but he's getting a good amount of targets, 5 and 9. So you could definitely take a shot there. Looks like a solid play. Who else we got? it looks like Hunter is going to be out. So I'll talk about that Raiders team, but they're just kind of running the ball, so I don't trust going to any of their like pay down options. But you can definitely take a look, like a Matt Collins, who's questionable as well. So that Raiders receiving core might be very depleted. So maybe they just run the ball a ton, which will make Josh Jacobs obviously even more chalkier if those guys get ruled out. Russell Gage, wide receiver 3, not seeing a ton of targets, but he's there on a team that throws the ball a ton. That's really it. I mean, I'll mention one more guy. Wan'Dale Robinson. Going to be sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Going to be the number 1 option here for Danny Dimes. But, excuse me. Not going to see a ton of targets. Obviously, it's Danny Dimes. It's hard to trust him. He did get a touchdown. They said they're going to ease him back in. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure he played a ton of snaps. So, yeah, I don't get that logic. But 4,500 looks like a decent play. It's just, once again, hard to trust Danny Dimes. That does it for wide receivers. And then moving on to the tight ends. Obviously, Kelsey, just the main option for Mahomes. Even against a tough defense, do expect him to be pretty solid. Andrews looks like he's good to go. Love him at 7,400. Price really hasn't moved. As we saw with Andrews, I mean, he's huge upside. Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say. Really like me some Andrews. I've liked him every game so far this season. Waller is out, so you could look to a guy like Foster Moreau. We'll talk about him in a second. Kittle, don't mind him against Kansas City. They're going to have to score the ball. Targets have only gone up 5, 4, 6, 10 for 83. So they were down in that game. They were forced to throw the ball. He was involved. If they're down in this game, they're obviously going to force the ball to Kittle, so I like him a good amount, 5,300. Njoku looks decent. Tanyan's been getting involved. Obviously, they were down a ton against the Jets, so they had to throw. Schultz, 3,600 is just too cheap there. He's had the injuries. They weren't looking to him with the Cooper Rush. Expect, a bounce back here for Schultz. He's a great tight end. Dak back. They're getting him involved. Hayden Hurst looks okay. Does have a little bit of upside. Ballinger looks okay. So, I mean, for the tight ends, it's either, pay up for like a Kelsey or Andrews or, Kittle looks fine, those top 3 guys. Otherwise, I would just kind of stick to paying down for guys like, let me pull them out real fast. Like Foster Moreau, he'll be starting tight end. He's a solid pass catcher. So he has some upside there. 2,800 just too cheap. K. Dotton, will get involved with Cam Brate, most likely out. As we saw that game 5 against Atlanta, he got 7 targets, caught 6 of them for 43 yards. Red zone threat, so another cheap option there at tight end at 2,700. Yeah, I'd say those are the best, pay down options for tight end, and they could really help you guys pay out or pay up for, some studs. And then defense, Cowboys defense looks, pretty solid. I'd say my favorite defense would be probably Packers. Taylor Heineke, starting quarterback. He's a rusher. He's decent, but like 3,400. Really like that price tag against Washington. Do expect them to just have a brutal offense, as we've seen so far. Pay down options. Don't mind the Texans. It's gross, but like, let's say Josh Jacobs doesn't have a massive game. They're only down to Devontae Adams, Foster Moreau, and most likely Josh Jacobs. Carr is a guy who is turnover prone, so don't mind it. You can definitely look to that as a cheap pay down option at defense. So that's kind of the slate breakdown for today, guys. I know I liked a lot of people. I'm assuming everyone does. It's just pretty hard to choose, which options to go with. I think I'm going to stick with the Dak Prescott Detroit game. Just really like targeting Detroit. Probably will run it back with some of the what game? Seattle versus the Chargers. Some of those guys. I think that's how I'm going to attack this slate. So if you guys like the video, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.